So one of my dream postseason matchups is set to get tipped off this coming Monday. We have the New York Knicks versus the Indiana Pacers. These two teams went 2-1 against each other throughout the course of the season in favor of Indiana. It's worth noting that the last time they played each other was before the All-Star break. So there are a lot of moving pieces there. OG Anunoby wasn't as present through each of those matchups. Pascal Siakam wasn't as present through each of those matchups. So if you're going to analyze this series based off of what we saw during the regular season, it's a little tough to do it because they haven't played each other in so long. And there are a lot of different parts that are on the roster for both of these teams that they didn't get through every single matchup every time they met each other this year. So obviously the thing to start with here is the elite point guard matchup. We have Jalen Brunson versus Tyrese Haliburton, two point guards who kind of have a little bit of a similar background, some differences, but there are some similarities with how they started their careers. So for one, these aren't two one and done point guards. I know Tyrese Haliburton was drafted higher than Jalen Brunson, but these are two guys that stayed multiple years in college. Tyrese did 2 years at Iowa State. Jalen Brunson is one of the greatest college basketball point guards of all time. He did 3 years at Villanova. Then they come into the league and they're kind of backing up or playing next to already elite point guards. Tyrese Haliburton comes into Sacramento and he's playing next to De'Aaron Fox, kind of coming off the bench. And then once he started playing a little bit of that two-guard role, they'd alternate between him and De'Aaron Fox as far as playmaking duties and primary point guard duties would go. And then Jalen Brunson came off the bench playing with Luka Doncic and kind of finally emerged and hit the scene as a future elite player, or gave people that impression that he could be a future elite player in the 2022 playoffs. And they were both moved. Tyrese Haliburton was traded midseason over to Indiana, and Jalen Brunson signed with the Knicks, and now they both solidified themselves as franchise superstar-esque point guards. And I think Jalen Brunson is making a legitimate case at being the best point guard in the NBA right now. He's making a very, very compelling case with how he's been playing, not just through the regular season, but throughout the postseason. He averaged a ridiculous 35 points in that first round against the Philadelphia 76ers. So that's kind of the precursor headed into this series. I think for one, the thing you have to look out for if you're Indiana, this is a very tough matchup. This is a tougher matchup against a Bucks team that didn't have a strong identity at all, struggled defensively, and was also missing their best player. And for multiple games throughout that series in the first round, they were missing their two best players. They spent 2 games without Damian Lillard and Giannis, and every single game that series without Giannis. So now you're playing a Knicks team who has a very strong identity, who is relatively healthy. They are playing without Julius Randle, but they do have their best player on the roster, a guy who has given them a ton of issues throughout the course of their matchups this season. JB is averaging around 35 points against New York when they met up this year on 49% shooting from the floor. So Indiana, on top of that, is not a really strong defensive team. So your question is, do they have what it takes right now to slow down Jalen Brunson? I had more faith in Philadelphia to do just that. I liked Philadelphia's individual defenders, guys like Kelly Oubre, guys like Nick Batum, a multitude of players who I thought could have slowed him down but weren't able to do it. I don't think Indiana has better defensive matchups for Jalen Brunson relative to what Philly has. So I think this is going to be a series where Jalen Brunson kind of has his way. Maybe they go with Aaron Nesmith on him, and I think that's a little bit of a change. He's less of a lengthier defender than a Kelly Oubre and a Nick Batum, a little bit more stout. So maybe that matchup could stunt him a little bit, but JB's a guy who can have a slow first 2 games and then completely explode the rest of the series. We saw him do just that against Philly. So what defensive matchups does Indiana have to try to slow down Jalen Brunson? That is the biggest question for a Pacers team that wasn't very strong from a defensive standpoint. And one thing I like about this Knicks team as well is the other guys can really beat you. Philly really banked on this idea that if we slow down Jalen Brunson or if we double him late in games, we're going to make other guys beat us. Those other guys show the ability to beat them. There was a play last night where they double JB. He kind of brings 2 defenders over to the left side, then finds Josh Hart wide open at the top of the key to knock down a shot to pretty much seal the game for the Knicks. And we've seen that continuously. OG Anunoby got a catch, attacked a closeout, and got a huge and one dunk over Joel Embiid. Those guys around JB may not be elite level shot creators. And I said this before, they may not be elite level shot creators, but they can make shots and finish plays when JB's kind of in trouble. JB averaged 9 assists throughout that series. That indicates that those other guys are well prepared to execute late in games. As I said, they're not all-star level players. I don't think they have better second and third options than Indiana, right? Tyrese Haliburton has Pascal Siakam next to him, who was actually their leading scorer in that first round against the Milwaukee Bucks, but those guys can finish out plays, and I think that's going to be huge for the Knicks. We saw it. Philly tried to make those other guys beat them, and the other guys beat them. I love their supporting cast on offense. Not elite offensive players, but they have a very, very good chemistry with one another, and they are really, really good at finishing out possessions strong. And then there's also the rebounding advantage. Indiana is not a team that's going to win games on the margins, right? And so one of those marginal things that make a huge difference in a playoff series is rebounding, especially offensive rebounding and defensive rebounding too. And this Knicks team is a better rebounding squad. And I think that's going to be a major issue right now for this Pacers team. They play pretty much a 5-out system. There's a lot of pick and pop going, so a lot of their bigger players are out of the paint. Well, New York is going to punish you with that, especially guys like Josh Hart. That he was so valuable that first round against Philly, where he averaged 16 points and 12 rebounds as a guard. I'd have to kind of go back and look at the books and see the last time we saw a guard of his size averaging 12 rebounds per game in a playoff series. But I think the Knicks have a rebounding advantage, and that is going to be a huge edge this series. So if the Knicks are able to muck this series up, which they will, they're one of the best defensive teams in the NBA. I think they're going to be able to slow down that Indiana offense, both in the half court and in transition, because we know Indiana likes to get out and run. Then they can win again on the offensive boards or on the defensive boards, right? They can do those sorts of little things that can make a huge impact on this series. So if they're able to limit Indiana from an offensive standpoint, they can do things like rebound and get back on the other end and set up good half-court possessions and punish a limited Pacers defensive attack. So like I said, they're going to muck it up, make this a series where the best team has to win on the marginal stuff, and I trust New York right now to win on the marginal stuff. And I also like New York's defensive matchups as well. So one of your biggest things is trying to slow down Tyrese Haliburton. I don't think the Pacers are going to be able to win this series with Pascal Siakam being their best guy. I think if you're able to slow down Haliburton, if you're able to limit Miles Turner, who is probably going to be defended a lot of times by Mitchell Robinson, who is a very underrated jump shot defensive player from the big man position, then New York is going to have their way defensively. And New York has kind of had their way against Haliburton when they played him. As I said, that was earlier, way earlier in the season before All-Star break, but Haliburton's averaging just 19 points against that Knicks defense. Now, they've got more minutes from Deuce McBride, who's been amazing defensively this series at the point of attack, and also OG Anunoby. So they're able to slow down Tyrese Haliburton, keep him from running out in the open court and setting up transition looks, and also limit him in the half court. New York has a lot of things in their favor. They have a lot of things right now that can limit the Pacers' pace, no pun intended, and put it back in their favor. And if they're able to do just that, then I trust New York to win this series. This is one of those series where I think the marginal stuff, the uglier, more grinded out stuff is going to beat out what is a prolific Indiana Pacers offense that got held to under 100 points just once this entire 82-game season. So I have New York winning this series in 5 games. I've got them winning in 5. For one, I think they really punch him in the mouth the first 2 games. Home court, I think Indiana may get 1 back at Gainesbridge, but ultimately I think the Knicks are pulling this one out. There's way too much momentum. I love their supporting cast. They can muck this series up and slow things down, and I think it's going to make a huge difference. And I really don't trust Indiana right now when it comes to slowing down Jalen Brunson in late fourth quarter situations. I really don't. And even if they want to decide to throw a million double teams at him, that defense isn't well prepared enough right now, or isn't set well enough to really be good from a rotational standpoint. So if JB finds those other shooters, which he is really good at, being able to make plays out of double teams and finding guys out on the perimeter, they're going to be able to take advantage of the lack of great rotational defense by Indiana, and they're going to get easy buckets late in the game. I think there's going to be a huge difference maker this series for the Knicks. So I've got Knicks in 5. I have JB going ballistic this series again. I have him averaging over 30 points per game this series. And like I said, I love the matchup. You have 2 great point guards. Their games are kind of different. JB's more of a score-first player who can be a really good assist guy when needed. And then you have a great playmaker, one of the best playmakers in the league in Tyrese Haliburton. But I trust New York's defense a lot more to slow him down And I trust them on the marginal stuff like defense, like rebounding, winning those hustle points, and things like that. So I had the Knicks winning this one in 5 and advancing to the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time in seems like forever. I can't remember the last time they were in the Eastern Conference Finals, at least when I started watching basketball. So it's really good to see New York back in this position. And once they get to the conference finals, a lot is possible from there, right? It's not outside of the realm of possibility that this team could end up making an NBA Finals appearance. If they're good enough to get to the East Finals, they're good enough to get to the NBA Finals. So that's how good this team has been this particular season and also this postseason. They're dealing with a healthier team, right? They did play a Sixers squad that had their best player relatively unhealthy in Joel Embiid, so that could be a difference maker as well. But I like this Knicks team all around a lot more, and I have them taking this series. So let me know what y'all think, and we'll see how things go come game 1 this coming Monday.